All right, let's try it again. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, thank you guys so much, and welcome to the last night of the 2019 Community Justice Academy. And we are so thrilled that you guys are here. My name is Kristen Martin. I am a Deputy Prosecuting Attorney with the Community Prosecution Division, and I will be serving as your moderator this evening. We are here to talk about such an important topic, which is the Sex and Violent Offender Registry, and hopefully we'll be able to get your questions answered. As a reminder, since this is the last night, we would truly appreciate if you took a few minutes to fill out your evaluation. This is one of the suggested topics that has appeared on evaluations in previous years, so we truly do listen to those suggestions that you offer us. So now what I would like to do is I would like to introduce our presenters for this evening. The first one is Deputy Prosecutor Cindy Ochin. Cindy has been a Marion County Deputy Prosecutor since 2003 with a major focus in domestic violence, sex crimes, and child abuse. Cindy supervised the Sex Crimes Division from 2008 until 2014, which she then accepted the position of the Adult Protective Services Prosecutor, which involves the investigation of physical abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of endangered adults. This position also allows for the prosecutor to file in probate court to appoint guardians for some endangered adults, and has a section of community outreach to teach the community about identity theft prevention and awareness of fraud and scams. Our second presenter for this evening is Captain Alan Schrum. He has been a member of the Sheriff's Office for the last 18 years. Captain Schrum has been assigned to the Sex and Violent Offender Registry Unit for the last 12 years, and for the last 4 years he's actually served as the supervisor of that division. He's attended additional trainings, including cyber investigation, digital forensic triage, mobile device forensic, and then also teaches Offender Watch to every county in Indiana. So, very impressive. So at this time, we'd like to welcome Cindy up here to begin her presentation.
You know, you should not clap until you see how good we are.
Yeah.
Just saying.
We already know.
You already know? Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you a brief history lesson, and then Captain Schrum is going to talk about what the Marion County Sheriff's Office does as far as enforcing the sex offender registry. So the first thing is a caveat. Kristen and I tried a case some years ago. The sex offender registry has been in effect since like 1994 or 96. It has changed many, many times. So you can't say to me, what does someone have to do on their sex offender registry? Because depending on when you were convicted of your crime, depending on what you have to do in the sex offender registry. So the caveat to this, Chris and I tried a case, and it was filed in 2008. And the lady had a 20-year delayed disclosure. So this happened to her when she was 5. When she was 25, her son was turning 5, and she was starting to have nightmares about what had happened to her. So they came to us and said, will you file this case? So we filed the case. It was one of the most touching cases Kristen and I have ever tried. You could see the young lady reliving the incident as it went on, and it's the only case that I've tried where the jurors waited to speak to my victim after the case and hugged her. Very, very, it was bad. But it happened in 1986, and the sex offender registry was not in effect in 1986. So after we tried this case, 20 years later, and he was convicted, he was convicted of B felonies, and when we tried it, it would have been an A felony under the law that was now, and that would have been 20 to 50 years. Instead, it was a B felony, and the sentence was 16 to 20 years. And then, because it happened in 1986, he didn't have to register at all. Right, because the sex offender registry was not in effect. So the caveat to this is you can't just say, oh, you're convicted of a sex offense, you should be on the sex offender registry. So when you're asking those questions, understand also I printed out the statute, it's 32 pages long, right? So it's very difficult. It takes a lot of stuff to figure out what your particular requirements would be under the sex offender registry. All right, so the history is this. Megan's Law, Jacob Wetterling, these are the cases. You guys remember Polly Klaas, right? All of these are like people who, little kids who were killed and molested and killed, and that's why we did the sex offender registry. So there's a federal sex offender registry law, that's SORNA, and y'all remember Adam Walsh, his father did the America's Most Wanted show for a long time, right? So these are the kinds of things these are the sorts of cases that got the sex offender registry started. In Indiana, ours is named after a young man by the name of Zachary. So as I said, it started in 1994, and at that point in time, there were only 10 crimes on the list. And then they added things as it went along. I'm not putting all the additions on there, that's part of the caveat. If I did that, this presentation would be, like pages and pages long. So they would keep adding things, they would add, the person's convicted in other states had to register, because at one time you just registered if you were convicted in Indiana. Then they realized people would move from state to state, so they had to add that. Then they put in juveniles. So juveniles is a weird thing that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Sexually violent predators have their own definition. There are actually 3 different definitions of sexually violent predator in the statute because they added it, then they changed the definition, then they changed the definition. So I can't tell you what qualifies because it would depend on where you would be. At some point we add attempts and conspiracies to the registry. You can see what happens is we keep adding more things to the registry of crimes that we wanted to be on there. We're going to talk about this convicted after 1994 language, but if you remember what I said about my case where the guy happened in 1986, there's some caveats related to that as well. We see that there's lifetime registrations for people under 12. In the federal law, there are some crimes where you have to be on probation or parole for the rest of your life, depending on the crime that you commit and if you're convicted under the federal law. Child porn in the beginning was not at all a registry offense. But what they did in the beginning was they added possession of child pornography only if you had a prior and related conviction for child pornography. So your first child possession conviction was a pass and you didn't have to register, and then after you got a second one, then they made you register. That was in 2005. However, in 2007, they got a little smarter and they said, you know what, we'll make that first one no longer a pass, and if you're possessing child pornography, we're going to make you register. You see that we also add human trafficking. That became a big thing. We've prosecuted some of those cases here in Marion County. And now, so that was also added. We just had a conviction on a promoting prostitution case, so that man will have to register as a sex offender as well. And sexual battery. In 2007, what they did also was they added violent offenders. It used just to be the sex offender registry. Now it's a sex and violent offender registry, and we've added murderers and voluntary manslaughter. Captain Shrum will talk about a little bit about that. Those people, right, because it was added in 2005, there aren't a lot of those folks on the registry yet because many of them are probably still in prison, and then as they get out, they will have to register after they get out of prison. So, Captain Shrum will also tell you about more of the information, but every time they added to the sex offender registry, they would add more information that had to be collected. And as I said, Captain Shrum will tell you a lot about that kind of stuff. All right, so I want to talk about this convicted after language. All right, so there was a guy by the name of Richard Wallace who was a convicted sex offender. He was convicted before the statute went into effect, and but after the language was removed. So his ex-wife found out that he was a convicted sex offender and was not on the sex offender registry. You can see where this is going, right? So she calls the police and says, hey, he's a convicted sex offender, he should be on the registry. Mr. Wallace says, no, I shouldn't. I was convicted and served my sentence before it even went into effect, right? That's called ex post facto. So punishing somebody for something that wasn't a crime or that hadn't happened before, we're not allowed to do that. So basically we tried him in here in Marion County, and he was convicted of failing to register as a sex offender. And then the Court of Appeals said, nope, we're not going to make that the case. And I see that's fair, because if someone he might not have pled guilty or might have done something different if he knew. How's he supposed to predict that a sex offender registry is going to come into effect? So if you were convicted, which is why we couldn't put that man on the registry that we convicted in 2009 for his 1986 case. There's also a case that does some things about where people are allowed to live, right? So in the United States Constitution, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And one of those things means it's the right to own property, right? And so there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Pollard, and Mr. Pollard was convicted of a sexual offense. but he owned his property, right? So when you're on the sex offender registry, there are certain places you're not allowed to live near, right? Schools, parks, those kinds of things. There is an exception to that though, because if you own your property ahead of time, we cannot make you sell and move from the place where you live, right? It's not renting, I mean, if you rent somewhere or something like that, but if you owned your property before you were convicted of the sexual offense, then we cannot make you move from that residence. See, I forgot to pick up the clicker. It's here, right? Okay, so juvenile registrants. All right, so juveniles are different. The sex offender registry says people over the age of 18 must register based on, X, Y, and Z. Juveniles are not a must. They are only required to register if they are found likely to reoffend. This means that they have to, and it doesn't happen immediately upon their conviction. It happens after they have been through treatment. So they're found true of the offense. They go through their treatment, whether that be in a facility or at or outpatient therapy or something like that. And after they go through their treatment, then we as prosecutors can say, hey judge, we think this person is a person who's likely to reoffend. So there has to have a full-blown hearing in front of a judge where we would bring in the psychiatrist or the psychologist who treated that person, and then that person would give their testimony, and then the judge would make the decision as to whether or not he thinks that person is likely to reoffend, and then he would make the decision as to whether or not they would be put on the sex offender registry. My understanding is that in Marion County at this point we have just two juveniles on the sexual offender registry. So it doesn't happen very often. I don't think that we ask for it a whole lot in the juvenile courts because we don't get it very often, and so it's got to be really, really a big one before we can get that ask and that they'll put them on. I can't speak to the other counties. I don't know how often they do that, right? I can just talk about what we do in Marion County, but this is what they have to do. So those people is done even after treatment, and then it's clear and convincing evidence that the judge thinks they are likely to reoffend. I think Kristen told me about one that the guy was convicted of a sexual offense, and then not convicted, sorry, in juveniles it's found true of a sexual offense, went to treatment, was found true of another sexual offense, and then we asked for that person to be put on the sex offender registry, and the court said no.
What?
Right. So I can't speak to you. We put it out there, and then the judges make those decisions. So we try, we do what we can to make sure that happens. But in a juvenile, part of it's different. It's rehabilitation and much more of that than it is in adult court. But that's the difference between that. It's not mandatory. It's not a shall register. It is may register depending on if the judge finds that information. All right. So there's straight being on the registry. There is a person who is on probation, right? And then there is parole. All right. So we have, if you're not on probation or parole, then all you have to do is do the straight registry. And as I said, Captain Sherman will tell you about that. But if you are on probation in Marion County, all right, again, this speaks to Marion County. I don't know what some other counties do. But the program for sex offender probation takes approximately 3 years. It involves going to sex offender counseling. There are polygraphs that have to be taken. You have the standard conditions of probation, right? No drinking, no drugs, all those things that go along. And then you have some of these things. You're not allowed to view obscene material, not allowed to travel after 10. You can't go to the schools. You can't go to Boys and Girl Scouts, 4-H, anything where kids are present. They don't want you around. You can't have relationships with people who have children under the age of 16 unless you go ask the court for permission. And so those are the sex offender probations. They actually have their own sex offender probation unit in Marion County, so those people are all in one group together so that they are, it's a pretty stringent program. Very rarely does anyone get through it. Many times they end up back in prison because they can't complete that program. All right, so parole is a little bit different. What I thought was interesting in parole is that you aren't allowed to fly drones to record people. So if you're on probation as a sex offender, or parole for a sex offender, you can't fly a drone. But basically it's many of the same provisions, and except for in this one also you can't go around, you can't be in a relationship with someone who has children under the age of 18 unless you ask permission. So it's really, you can see that it's very difficult. How do you avoid locations where a person under the age of 18 might congregate? It's kind of hard, right? I mean, so you go to some place and like, okay, I better get off the bus, right? The Indigo bus. I mean, so it is a little hard to do, but so it takes a lot of work to get through that. All right. Hey, I did well, right? I got my 5 minutes in, okay? Captain Strum will talk to you now, and then we'll have questions at the end.
I don't know if I can follow that. Jeez. Well, I'm Captain Strum, and like Cindy said, it's really, to put it outright, the registry is polluted, okay? They keep adding to it, adding to it, adding to it, and they don't go in and refine anything for the most part. But I'll tell you what we do, how we do it, and what we can do for you, okay? This is my section right now. I've got 11 people that actually do nothing but the registry in the Sheriff's Department. That is their sole job, is to go out and check offenders all day long. I run 2 shifts, 7 days a week, and for the 3rd shift, I have a deputy that's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So if there's ever a question or something needs to be done, our control knows how to get a hold of us, okay? Now, just so you guys know, I'll mess this one up, I always do. Told you. In Indiana, there's 4 classifications of a sex offender. Kind of like Cindy said, there's sexual violent predators, which is the bad of the bad. Then you have offenders against children, regular sex offenders, and then the recently added violent offenders. Here in Marion County, we have 20 violent offenders registered in our county. That'll continue going up for every year as they get out, okay? We'll go through the numbers on the others as we go through. But something to understand is on the classification, and kind of like Cindy said, we don't classify sex offenders to what they fall into. Indiana Department of Corrections does that, all right? And that even goes for if you're convicted out of state, say you're convicted in Illinois, their sexual misconduct with a minor may not be the same as the state of Indiana. But what happens is that offender will move into Indiana, and then Indiana Department of Corrections will go through their file. And they'll equal it out to whatever their crime equals to us. That's how they go in and classify somebody. As of August 2019, there were 611 active sex offenders in Marion County. That's just your regular sex offender. Okay? Well, it gets worse. Hang on. Hang on. Okay? There's 442 active offender against children. Okay? That's on top of the 600. All right? And this is just in Marion County. Okay? There was 592 sexual violent predators in Marion County as of the end of August. Okay? And then 20. Our number has not changed for violent offenders. It's 20. These numbers can change, and they do change daily, and they can change hourly. The system we use is called Offender Watch to track. You can also get on it when you're at home on your computer and pull up sex offenders, and it's true. When we change information in that system, it's automatic. You'll see that change if you pull that person up. We currently have about 5,900 files on sex offenders that's been in Marion County since I've been on here in 12 years. Marion County has the most offenders in the state of Indiana. The closest county to us right now is Allen County, and they got 460 some offenders, okay? So I did this morning, I pulled the new numbers. As of this morning, there was 596 sex offenders. We went down a little bit there. Offenders against children, we had 444, a little bit up there. And then SVPs was 607, and we still had 20 offenders that are violent. But on top of that, we have 35 that's awaiting classification from DOC. So those numbers will increase again, okay?
I'm just wondering about the word active. Are these post-conviction classifications? It's not people roaming around?
No, these people have been convicted, and we know where they're at.
Gotcha.
Okay? These are the ones we check here in Marion County. Hence the reason I have so many deputies that work in my section is because we have, an average, we run about 1,700 sex offenders in Marion County. Why do we get so many? I don't know. There's 12,000 offenders that reside in Indiana alone. That's just in the state of Indiana. This is the information that's collected when an offender comes down to register. Of course, we do their name, their address, and everything. Some of the things that you don't think about is we get their vehicle information. That doesn't mean a vehicle you own. That's a vehicle that you're in most of the time. So if your neighbor takes you to the grocery store, they have to register your neighbor's vehicle.
Oh, no, okay.
Yep. That does nothing but help us, okay? Scars, marks, tattoos, they have to register those. We also do like family information. We try to get all the family information we can. That's so if you abscond and you take off, we got somebody we can go to and say, hey, look out.
Are they allowed to have guns?
Guns? No, they're convicted felons.
But what about, like, if you are asking for your neighbor or your whatever closest family, what about the guns they can have access to?
Anybody can have an access to a gun.
Yeah, I know.
The offender is not allowed to have a weapon, okay? So if we find one on them or in their house, they can be charged with it. They know that. But as far as friends, there's no way we can control that. There's no way anybody can control that, where the weapons are. But offenders are not allowed to have weapons, okay? Internet, if they get on the internet, we get, I'll get with you in just a second. We get their username and email, okay? That way, if we want to pull them up, we can pull it up. Question?
Okay, if a friend gives them a gun, is the friend then, could they be convicted of a crime?
Cindy, can you answer that one? I mean, I don't think we've ever tried that. I know where did they do, they just did a case that way, but it wasn't a sex offender, it was another person that did it. We've never tried a case that way. I don't even think we've had a case that way yet. Watch tomorrow. I'll get an email from the sheriff, hey, Sharon. Did you have a question? I thought somebody did. Yes, ma'am?
Were you gonna explain what the violent offender was, or that sort? Because it seems all violent to me, so violent.
Violent would consist of murder, manslaughter, conspiracy to attempt murder, manslaughter, things like that, not actual sex crime. When an offender comes down, they have to come down to the jail at 40 South Alabama to register. Once they come down there, then what happens is they get assigned to a deputy to check, okay? And what we do, like it says up here, that we go in and we verify the information they give us. Every deputy in Marion County that has a car checks sex offenders, including the sheriff himself, okay? A minimum, I think the sheriff checks 3, but every deputy in Marion County checks at least 5. My guys check 600 and what I say, 8 every month. The other offenders get checked twice a year. State law only requires it once a year. We do twice. And the sexual violent predators, we do every month. So we do them 12 times a year. Law only requires it to be done 4. So. I get ahead of myself sometimes when I start talking. The gift of gab. We do the compliancy checks twice a year, just like it says right there. SVP, we do 12 times a year. Along with the 12 times a year we check offenders, we also do all the investigations in-house when it comes to a sex offender and a registry issue. What we do is we get tips from the public, we get tips from other departments, we work hand in hand with probation, parole, Indiana State Police, Indiana Crimes Against Children, IMPD.
So what would a tip look like? Is that just what we know, what you're telling us now, if they're in the presence of children and you know that...
A lot of times that's exactly what it is. we'll get an email, and at the end of the presentation, there's an email address that you can send tips to, and our phone number's on there too. They'll send us an email and say, hey, this guy's around children. Well, unfortunately for us, that's not a crime. Unless he's on probation or parole, and then it has to be a stipulation of his probation and parole to be on it. So every sex offender, it's a case-by-case basis. We have to actually physically go in and figure out what they're convicted of, what the, you know, the requirements are. So, it's interesting some days, very.
Okay.
Hence the gray hair.
No,
I blame my kid, but
no.
Yeah.
Wow.
They have to come in within 72 hours of release if they're a sexual violent predator, release of a facility. So if they get out of jail, they have 72 hours to come to the sheriff's office and register, or they're in violation. Okay. If they're a regular offender or offender against children, they have 7 days from the time they're released. Yes, ma'am.
Keep saying regular offender.
Which is a sex offender. It's the lowest classification of a sex offender.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I want to go back to, I didn't hear his complete question. I thought he was asking, like, are these people out in the public? Is that what he was saying? Yeah, and you.
Oh, I didn't. Ask
I
your
mean,
question
These
again.
are people that, I mean, they're not in jail. These are people out in
Yeah.
public. Right, okay.
Yes.
These are post-conviction classifications. These are not suspects in active.
Correct. These
investigation.
are post-conviction.
Okay, yeah.
They have been convicted and they're back out. They've been released
Okay.
on probation, parole, whatever.
So they are out amongst us.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
1,700 of them. Also, they have to register every county they live in, work in, or attend school in. So if they work in Marion County, or live in Marion County and work in Hendricks County, they have to register here and Hendricks County. And both counties can violate him if he doesn't. Okay? They have to change their address within 72 hours. If they move, they got to notify us within 72 hours, and they have to do that in person. They can't call and say, hey, I'm moving. You have to come down and physically fill out the paperwork yourself. Yes, sir?
Yes, if they move to another state and they don't notify you, but if they register at the other state, does the state then notify Indiana and let them know what grade they are so they can, because some states I know don't grade them like Indiana does, okay?
Right. And it's just like we don't grade Illinois like they do.
Exactly.
What happens is with the system we use, it's nationwide. Okay? Everybody has access to it. And then also, once they register, they ask for the records from us. It's no different if they come from Illinois to us, then we ask Illinois for their records so we can add it into our system.
For general knowledge, are there any states that are more lenient toward sex offenders than others?
Yes.
I know it. I know that.
And then there are states that are harder. If you move to Florida and your registration actually expired and you're no longer required to register here, and you move to Florida or Mississippi, you are automatically required to register for life. Then if you move back to Indiana, you are now required to register for life. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain on the information on the website, it's like you're not supposed to tell your neighbors to warn them or you will be in trouble. I mean,
Does it say that?
so many words, that's what it says.
You can tell your neighbors. It's public knowledge.
Well,
What we tell you is, sex offenders also have rights, okay? They can turn around and sue you for harassment if that's what you're doing to them.
I don't see that, but someone purchased a home in our neighborhood.
Right.
I think I saw him one time on my street. I saw him one time, and I've seen somebody else at his address doing yard work, but I've never seen him again. Could he be living someplace else and
He could be.
somebody
He
else
very
in
well
his
could
house?
be.
But he has to notify you though, right?
He's supposed to notify us,
Is
yes.
that common that they will buy a house and live someplace
No.
else and then let somebody else that's in trouble live in their house?
No, that's not common.
I was just saying, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And what if it's going?
No. We have female and male. Female is probably about 15%, and the rest is male. It's a low number. So, yes, sir?
One more tough question.
Tough one?
If they travel overseas to like a country where pedophilia is a common practice,
Okay.
does the federal government, are they able to track them when they travel?
I can't really answer whether they can track them or not, but when they travel, yes, they can know that they went there. They also have to notify whatever department and whatever state, they have to notify that they're going overseas, okay? Whether they track them when they're there, I have no idea. If an offender does not have a permanent address, they're considered homeless, okay? And they have to register every 7 days in person at 40 South Alabama. Now, when they register homeless, they can register Washington and LaSalle. I sleep on the corner. But understand this, that if I go to Washington and LaSalle at 10 o'clock at night, they better be at Washington and LaSalle at 10 o'clock at night. And they know that. Our homeless guys, for the most part, they come in every 7 days, and if they change to a different homeless camp, they come in and let us know. They even tell us what kind of tent they're in, or sleeping bag. I've had a guy tell me, well, I got a blue sleeping bag this week. Okay. Well, this includes if an offender's in a hotel or a motel, shelters, Wheeler Mission, they still have to come in every 7 days. The hotel is kind of touchy right now because if they're paying the rent, it's not considered homeless. Now, they could pay for a week, but they have, they don't have to come in at the end. But we'll get them for not being truthful with us. Yes, sir.
Do natural disasters mess with any of this?
Natural disasters. How do you mean mess with?
So like
They're still required by law to come in no matter what. So if a tornado blows through here right now, every sex offender that is affected, if they have to leave their residence, they have to come tell us.
Okay.
Absolutely. It would not change anything that we do. It can't. Their consequences is we nail them for what's called failure to register, okay? And when they fail to register, it's a class 6 felony. Now, the only misdemeanor that we will lock an offender up for when it comes to the registry is for a sex offender and an offender against children not to have an Indiana ID, a valid Indiana ID, okay? If you're a sexual violent predator and you don't have a valid Indiana ID, it's a felony. If you've been convicted one time before for failure to register and you get popped again for it, it's now a level 5 felony. Okay? So there's a little bit of bite to it. See? Get the handcuffs. So we get them for failure to register as a sex offender. This one's the 1,000-foot rule. Again, it's a case-by-case basis on what they're convicted of, when they were convicted, and if they own the property before, okay? It's not a blanket thing that says a sex offender cannot live within 1,000 feet of a school. You can actually have a sex offender living right next door to a school, okay? It's not against the law for every sex offender. It's not one of their stipulations that they have to do. It's just like, sex offenders are allowed to be around kids, okay? They are allowed to hang around kids. They're allowed to be at parks unless they have this 1,000-foot rule, okay? If they have the 1,000-foot rule, then yes, they can't live within 1,000 feet unless they own the property prior to the conviction. Yes, ma'am.
So which sex offenders get the 1,000-foot rule?
It's a case-by-case basis, depending on what it would literally take me 45 minutes to an hour to explain to you everything that it would take. And then, when you move to a different type of sex offender, we'd have to go through it all again, okay? So if there's ever a question, send an email to us, call our office. We'll be more than happy to talk to you and try to figure it out with you, okay?
You know, all these cases, by the way, are not people that's committed sex offenses in Indianapolis. You've got that many on your list. But the biggest reason that we've got so many sex offenders in Indianapolis is all these counties around us, the judges will let them move out of there because of the circumstances they have to put up with being in small towns. They get run out of town.
A judge doesn't allow them to live or not live in that county or allow them to move out. Once they go to prison, they have to give Indiana Department of Corrections an address. Yes, most of those offenders will pick Indianapolis. Why? We're the biggest city in the state. You know, if you don't want to go back to Avon because that's where you were convicted at, because everybody in Avon knows you, where are you going to go? And I mean, to be honest about it, that's probably why. You're right. And actually, a year and a half ago, I did a study on how many sex offenders were actually not convicted in Marion County, and then it was about 46%. Were either from another county or another state, okay? And truthfully, it all boils down to that, hey, we're the biggest city in Indianapolis. We have more jobs, okay? And that's where they come. The rent in some areas are cheaper than what it is, and nobody knows it. Yep.
So my question is, at what point does the increase, even if it's just as a proportion of the population, you know, the area, the metropolitan area grows, we got 1,700 we're monitoring now, a year or two from now it might be 2,300. There's an awful lot of resources. Is it so hopeless that we've got to keep, I mean, does anybody get cured and earn their way back into society? Otherwise, we've got a shadow society living with us that we got to monitor, and it takes a lot of resources.
I can't answer whether anybody gets cured or not. I don't get into that part of it. And I don't think the prosecutor's office would either.
But there's no real thing like an ex-offender.
I can't answer that they ever get cured. I can tell you what I will do if they're here, okay? And that's exactly what we've been going through, so.
Yeah.
Maybe, is he asking, like, this isn't a lifetime on this registry, right? Isn't it just sometimes?
I don't think that's what he's asking.
Is
I
it
mean,
sometimes like it's a 3-year registry, sometimes it's a 10-year registry?
Indiana has a 10-year and a lifetime,
Oh,
okay? That's what we do, is 10-year and lifetime. SORNA has 15 and 25 in lifetime, which is federal, okay? So we actually have somebody that's been on the or will be on the registry for 25 years, but that's because they're federally from another state, not
So somebody
Indiana.
can be off the registry after a while?
Yes. After 10 years, you can be. Okay. Yeah. I'm getting my time. Offender against children and SVPs cannot volunteer on school property, youth programs, or at public parks. If they do, they commit a Class 6 felony. If they've been convicted before, it's then a Class 5 felony. This right here is the IC codes, which I know Cindy give everybody. Also, the 327-8069 is the Marion County Sheriff's Office Sex Offender Registry line. If you have a question, please call that number, okay? We will answer any question that you guys get or give us. Also underneath, if you go to indy.gov, forget the MCSD, I just noticed that was on there. If you go to indy.gov, go to the sheriff, and then you can go to Offender Watch. Okay, that's the program we use. All 92 counties use that program in the state of Indiana, so we talk to every county every day, okay? Along with that, you can send an email to us with a tip through there. You can also sign up for email notification when an offender moves into your area. All right, that way you know. And we encourage everybody to do that.
How do you keep?
Hang on just a second. I see I'm gonna get in trouble because I wasn't supposed to answer questions. But that's okay. I'm used to being in trouble.
We do have a lot of time for questions. What we're going to do, since we are recording this, is if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring a microphone to you, so that way anyone who's watching this later will be able to hear your questions. All right, we'll start here. You guys just pass down the line.
How do you keep from feeling so dirty? We can't just talking about this, making me feel so dirty.
It's not on.
It's not on.
Okay.
Well, just repeat the question.
It's not?
How do you keep yourself from feeling so dirty? Just talking about it is making me feel some kind of way. So what do you do to get it off of you at the end of the day?
Truthfully,
Yeah.
I'm going on a cruise in 4 days. I'll tell you, I've been in law enforcement 18 years. I was a firefighter for 21 before that. I truly believe that I can make a difference in what happens to everybody, or I wouldn't be doing this job for 12 years. So in the group of people that I have working for me, and along with the group of people the prosecutor has, and we get to work hand in hand with, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I could do it.
How do you do it?
I would say the same thing. Well, and we do, okay, so we're kind of like doctors in a way too. You know how they have that gallows humor stuff?
Yeah.
We have bad humor sometimes, and we have to spend a lot of time talking to each other about the things that we've been through. I mean, there are days, you learn to compartmentalize, like, this is bad, and then you go play with children. Or you go play with your children, and then you get to leave it behind. I mean, it was the same thing for all the prosecutors, right, that prosecute murders, and when we see, sometimes you do have to think, are all of these people like this? And then you realize, no, they're just a small segment of the population, and most people are honest and good people. So you just have to keep that in mind, that most people are honest and good people.
Okay, I have two questions. I have two questions. I'm a realtor and I represent clients, and in the purchase agreement, there is a line that talks about sexual offenders, and there's a website for them to go to. I tell my clients not to rely upon that information because I don't think it's accurate. Now, am I not telling the truth, or I'm just telling, when they, especially when they have children, I say.
Is it our website or is it
Yes.
somebody else's website?
No, it's the
It's ours?
Yeah.
If it's our website, the sheriff's website, it's very reliable.
Okay, well, I would stop telling people that. I've been doing that for years. I'm like, they don't live where they say they live.
It was incorrect this year because somebody showed me that website, and I called the registry and reported that person has not lived there for at least 6 months, because I know who rents out the house. It's a few doors down from me. And so the next time I looked at the registry, the woman was not on there.
Okay, so had we had the tip that that person wasn't living there for 6 months, we would have took care of it. But I can't, just because you as a neighbor say that this person doesn't live there, I have to get the homeowner to sign a verification saying this person doesn't live here. So hence I can write up the charges that I want to file on the guy and turn over to the prosecutor. I gotta have somebody that says, hey, this is my property and he is not here.
Okay, and then people that have offenses against children, are they allowed to live with their own children?
Yes, they can live with their own children. Go ahead.
Yeah, the gentleman back here asked, can they be cured? Even the mental health professionals don't agree on yes or no.
Correct.
So
There's
there's
not
no
an answer to
even
that
answer
question.
about that. There was a violent sexual predator living in our neighborhood. I was watching the registry, and suddenly he wasn't at that address anymore. Then after that, I found that he was living in one of the senior housing communities in Castleton. Are the residents who live in that building with him alerted as to that?
No.
Only if they check the registry.
Yeah.
Correct. Only if you check the registry. There isn't a big sign that pops up that says, hey, I'm a sex offender.
And we don't notify them.
No.
Right. So it's up to the staff there to share that with their residents.
It's not that,
Again, we go back to that, you can't harass them thing.
Correct.
all I can say is it's not our responsibility to notify the building owner that there's.
I'm gonna make a call.
Okay. Okay, yeah, going over there.
So I have a social work question.
Where is that coming from? Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't see, okay. A social work type question, okay.
Yes, so if there is a parent that is a sexual predator against children, their maid or whatever has an infant that has to go into the intensive care unit, there are at least 50 NICU beds in a NICU unit, and they have to have a code to get in. We as the hospital, if we find out they're that type of predator, do we not allow them to come see their child in the NICU?
I got you. I'm gonna say you need to talk to your legal staff at your.
Exactly.
Right,
That's a
you need to
legal
talk to your
question.
legal
You
staff
need to talk
at
to your
your
legal staff at the
hospital.
hospital.
You need to call legal at your hospital and find out what the
Yeah,
answer is.
there's no way we can answer that one.
Right.
Can you clarify, if you mess with your own kid, that kid can't live with you?
Well, right, if the victim is your own child, there'll be a no contact order while you're on probation or parole. Now, after probation or parole is over, then, and your sentence is ended, then you could be back with that child, unless someone else said, no, I don't want them around that child. And unless, of course, there's stipulations saying, yes, but
I know.
your own kid is a, right, touchy. So depending on, I mean, if it's over with and there's no contact order and your sentence is over with, you could be with that child. I would not want, technically yes, but if I were that person's other parent, I'd be like, no, thank you, but that's my own personal whatever, right? But I can't police that sort of stuff.
Is there a sex offender hotel on East Washington Street? Well, a hotel
Is there a
where
sex offender
offenders
hotel on
because
East
they
Washington?
can't find other housing. Is there a motel where they stay at?
There's a motel, there's several motels that they stay at. On East Washington Street, yes, there are a couple that they stay at.
They have to register every 7 days.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, okay. You want to give it back? Okay, go.
Sir, I believe you said that the community in Indiana that was number 2 for the number of sex offenders was Allen County. And I would imagine that's because Fort Wayne is the second largest city in the state. So I would like to know that. And also I would like to know, well, what about the 3rd and 4th cities? There's some other ones I would have thought might have a high population of sex offenders.
Lake County would be the 3rd. Okay. Their number I don't know, but I know they fall in 3rd. After Lake County, I don't know how it goes, but I know it drops off considerably. And then there's actually 2 counties that have like 6, but they're really rural counties. Yeah, 6 offenders in their county.
Oh, in the whole county.
In the whole county, 6. I offered to bus them that way, but.
Not even one per township. Wow.
I know. Oh, okay.
Go ahead over here.
Yes, my question is, you said all the offenders have to have a state ID. And what about the homeless population? How do they get the IDs and what address do they use?
Actually, a homeless offender can get a state ID from Indiana, from Marion County. And what they do is they use the form that they register with. If they take that to the BMV, they will give them an ID card because they know they have to have it. It will say whatever, if it's 40 in LaSalle, it will have 40 in LaSalle, okay? We actually got that through and got it pushed through about 4 years ago because we didn't want to lock up every offender for the ID violation. Okay, one, it would kill us and kill the prosecutor and the jails. Right, well, what's the point when we can fix that?
Kristen? Yeah, one over there.
Yeah, I just want to make some clarity that there are a lot of homeless people in the city, but not all of them are sex offenders. They're not
Right. Oh, yeah.
people that we need to worry about. I mean, they have other issues. I think I would be more worried about the regular guy next to me, not you, Ed. But, yeah, you know, regular folks than a homeless person. So, what is the percentage of regular folk doing the child porn and all that kind of stuff, and the homeless person who's?
I don't know the percentage. I know in Marion County, about 4 months ago, we had 102 homeless offenders. Okay, which really, yeah, compared to 1,700 offenders, that's not a lot. So.
And you may have addressed this, so registry requirements are per county, so if they are convicted in whatever county, so in Avon, they register there because they were convicted there and register here, if they move here?
Only if they, when they get out, they pick where they're gonna live.
Okay.
If they decide that if they were convicted in Hendricks County and they wanna live in Marion County, when they get out of jail, they come to Marion County.
So it's
They
based on
register
their
with us.
residency when?
If they work in Hendricks County, they not only register with us saying they live here,
Okay.
they have to register with that county saying they work there.
Okay.
So one of the things I said in my presentation is that it's very tricky, 32-page statute. If you Google the statute, you can read and find out what what their requirements would be. But it's very difficult for us to stand and say up here and say, well, this one or this one or this one. But the work and home is because we just want to make sure where you are. Oh, over there, sorry, go. We're switching sides.
If he gets out in 23, and it was a murder and molestation, a sodomization of an infant. So if you're looking at that, how long of a probation are you looking at once he's out?
Okay, so there are a couple different things. The amount of probation depends on the sentence that was given by the judge, right? So the judge, if someone's, and I don't know what your person was, you said a murder and a molest, but I don't know exactly what, right? I mean, okay. So if the judge sentenced that person to 45 years in prison, I'm just making this up, right? And then 10 years of probation, then 10 years after he's on probation. The probation is separate from the registry, okay? You still, even if you are a lifetime registrant, even when you're done with probation, you'd still have to register. So yours is a pretty specific question, and if you wanted to ask, we might be able to give you, like have a personal conversation, we might be able to give you a little more information about that, but as Mr. Trump said, the DOC will tell you that when they get out, and then when the person gets out, that will immediately go on the website. I'm speculating, murderers are like lifetime, right? Generally? I'm gonna get, you said it was an infant, right? That's an offender against children. I'm gonna guess that's a lifetime registration, but probation is different. Okay, understand probation, parole, and just being on the registry are 3 different things. And you can actually be on parole and probation at the same time, and then have to do the registry separate. Okay, so it's a kind of a tricky thing. So we could talk about that if you wanted to after, and we can have a little more conversation, or not, but. There should probably be, as a condition of probation, if you were directly involved, there should be a no contact order, I would think, but you'd have to look at that. It's what the judge sentenced in that case.
The home that was purchased by this man in our neighborhood was the first home purchased by someone that's listed as a pedophile, etc. The way he purchased the house, it was not through a realtor. It was a for sale by owner. And when I saw the woman going in for the Sunday open house, she looked at me straight, and I just thought something was off.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say.
And then I saw in this little booklet on, places for everybody to go for help, the homeless, etc. Was that woman from an organization in Marion County helping these people relocate? And did that person allow this person to get in our neighborhood. Because gosh darn it, I can't get the information from the registry as to what exactly he did. There's a woman that came to me. She was affected when she was a child. I've been victimized and I've got no justice. And how dare Marion County to help, if that's what happened.
Okay. All right, so here's the
Help
deal.
him get off.
I understand this is an emotional.
And I have a right to know what he's done.
Okay, so here's the deal. You got a lot of ifs, and so what I would suggest is that after this is over, we can, Captain Trump can talk to you, we can get the address, and then he can help you, because that's more of a one-on-one thing, because you're making a call, so he needs to have that information, and we'll see what we can do, okay? Because that, I mean, it's out here right now, because we don't know who or where. We'll talk to you after and specifically find out what the information is, and then we'll make sure we get in touch with you or find out what's up with that, okay? Yes, go ahead.
So while we're talking about neighborhoods, if there are a lot of kids in your neighborhood and you have a number of sexual offenders listed on the registry, it doesn't appear that, you know, we're not near a park, we're not near a school, some of us live 1,000 feet apart from each other. It doesn't appear that there's a problem with that according to the law. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
They're allowed to live places, they just cannot live within 1,000 feet of the school or a park or whatever the other things are.
If they
So-
have that condition.
If that is their condition. Not every sexual offender has that conviction,
Right.
condition.
And that's one of the things that I think, you know, is interesting in looking at the overall picture of various situations. I'm a CASA. I see that Marion County is taking in 2,700 kids a month and looking for foster homes. 1,700 sexual offenders seems like minuscule when you think we're trying to place that many kids. And we're living in a city of over 1 million people. So yes, I think this is a serious situation. I don't demean that at all. But I think part of the issue is to try and put it in perspective and see that we're trying to give a certain amount of balance to what it is that's going on, because we can't incarcerate everybody all the time, otherwise we'd all be in jail.
Any other questions? Right here, Chris. Are we about done? Last question? Okay, last question.
I was a little confused between the federal site, like, is it Sojourner? Sorna, okay. You said, okay, for our site here, it's 10 years or lifetime, but it's for Sorna?
SORNA, S-O-R-N-A.
S-O-R-N-A. What were the time limits for that? And also, would you find that same information on Sorna as you do on your website?
You'll find the same information on sex offenders on the national website, which is SORNA. We're not SORNA compliant, which is a federal registry issue. But the only reason we're not SORNA is because we have to change a few laws and do a couple other things. It takes a lot of political stuff. But their registry is 15 years, 25 years, and life. Okay? And we currently have 10 years and lifetime.
Go.
Well, let's give a big round of applause. I'd like to also give a round of applause to our audience here today. We've tackled some really difficult issues, some really in-depth topics, and we appreciate everyone's time and attention to these issues. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about what the prosecutor's office does, as well as the impact that our laws have on our community. We couldn't do this without our law enforcement partners, so I want to give it up for our elected sheriff, Mr. Kerry Forstall, and his representatives here today. I think it's also important to note that this is a true team effort from the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. There's a number of people who help make this program run. I want to give it up for Destiny back there. Give it up, Destiny, our communications specialist. We also have Michael Leffler over there. Michael, great job, as always. Jake Roches is with us here today. We've got Michelle back there with Ann. Thank you very much. We appreciate everything you guys do. Everybody checked in. Abby? Abby. Abby's here as well to help us out with everything. We have Emily Schrock here. Give it up for Emily Schrock. Cannot forget about our two presenters here today, Kristen and Cindy Oaken. Fantastic job. And obviously this event could not take place without the tremendous hard work and dedication of Annie Kern. Annie is here. This is something that she works on nearly year-round. Andy is a tremendous asset and benefit to the office. She's always thinking about ways to connect us to the community. Without Annie, we wouldn't be able to make the important inroads we can with the community. She is a tireless worker. She is a tremendous advocate for community members like you to make sure that your voices are always heard. So as an appreciation to Annie Kern, I'd like her to come up here. And here's Michael. Thank you very much, Annie. If you'd like to give a speech, the floor is yours.
Where has the time gone? The fourth night is here, the final night is here, and I will say this, it has been a delight to be part of what brings this project into Marion County. This is the 9th year, and it has truly been my delight to do this. And one of the things that's been just so wonderful, and we talked about this at the beginning, is our subjects are input from the audience and what's happening. So for that, I say thank you, and I'm going to remind you to do those evaluations. And the folks will be standing at the door to receive those evaluations. And then also, I'm going to give a shout out to our new prosecutor right here.